thing is that missing an opportunity to do something is a failure, in my view. That if you don't do something that you might have done that could have been good, that's a failure, but it's a missed opportunity. And you don't succeed with anything by not trying. So trying, if you're trying to make progress, involves failure. It's just what it is. We hear about people who are entrepreneurs that have created incredible things, but what you don't hear about all the things that they went through before that and failing and learning what to do. So the older people, I'm like you. I listened to the older people when I was younger too. I thought it was fascinating, but I'm kind of interested in history. But I have gotten things from younger people when said, I mean, like at a conference, and she said, this is one I'm thinking of in particular, who did a lot of really great things and said, "Oh, I think we're going to try this." And the older people in the room said, "Yeah, we tried that. It doesn't work." And she said, "Well, that's the old guard. It's the old way of thinking." That's a good way to look at things too, because you don't want to follow in the path of people before, because you don't get anywhere. But at the same time, she didn't listen to the advice. If people had actually tried the same thing, you got to try something different. If you want something to work, you don't repeat what other people have failed at. And I've seen that too many times too. Well, this hasn't been working, so we're gonna just do more of the same.
Well, I'll put you on the spot with this question because I think you'll be very adept at answering it. But how do you balance between not following the old guard and also, like, in terms of Tesla with the incandescent light bulb, not repeating those failures over and over again? Like, there has to be some balance with that.
Yeah. And I was Edison with the incandescent light bulb, but
I'm horrible with
here
this
we are.
analogy.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm a history geek, so I know all these things, but just for the sake of the recording. But um yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know, it's only in retrospect that you can say, well, we were doing the right thing. In the case of like trying so many different things to invent the light bulb, he was pretty sure there was going to be something that was going to work. I don't know why. Um, but he just knew each one of the things he tried didn't work, and sooner or later he'd hit something. Uh, that's just, I don't know if there's any answer to the question of when do you give up on something? There's a point at which things aren't working, so you make adjustments, or and one of the things that happens all the time is people don't give up on what they're doing soon enough, but that's kind of natural. I don't know, you can look back and say, I should have just given up on this years ago. But that's in retrospect. I don't know. You can't predict the future.
You know, one of the things I've always noticed, though, is that when you take a look at the industry of comedy, there are comedians that go, like Theo Von, Louis C.K., they go 15, 18, 20, 22 years without making their big break. And then suddenly something switches and they're everywhere. And
Yeah.
it's like, as you're talking about, it's not an overnight thing, and it takes a long time to realize that. One formula I have for myself, especially with this podcast, is consistency, patience, and iteration. I think if you're consistent, you can continue doing what you love. If you're patient, you don't focus on the outputs, you only focus on the inputs. And you also need to iterate. You need to make sure that you're always improving something 1% every day, so you're not just like stuck in that hole. Is this also things that you've learned as well? Like, do you have any secret formulas for life?
Well, I think that's great. And, with a podcast in particular, going from one episode to the next to the next. And I have a podcast as well, as that started recently. Um, I was kind of pushed into that by somebody who said, no, you got to do this. And I said, I've done a lot of online things, but I've never done a podcast. I don't know what I'm doing there. And so I'm not happy with how it started, but it's been improving each time, and I'm learning how to do it. And that's part of what it is. And the consistency in it too, because you have a following. and people have certain expectations. They won't want to come back for the next episode and find something completely different. That's not what they're there for. So in that case, you want it, but you have to find what your brand is, what your story is, and be consistent with that. Being patient, I mean, that's huge in everything, really. So you do have to you have to stick with it. But then it goes back to, when do you decide that that's enough and quit? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
There's no real good answer for that. Well, I mean, it's a good question to ask you in terms of what's your story? Like when you talk to people about what you do and what you're passionate about and what conviction you have for the future, what do you talk about?
Well, it changes. One of the things that's important there in terms of looking back, I can look back now and say, this is why I've been doing the things I have. Oh, this is how I am and how that's impacted what I've always decided to do. Now, I wish I could go back to when I was 20 and know these things from the beginning, but it's only looking back that I can see those things. So, um, yeah, you discover what you're passionate about. This is one of the things with young people, because I get asked all the time because I travel internationally a lot. I meet with college students and so on. Oh, this is what I really want to do, and I'm not sure if I can do it. First of all, in many developing countries, they don't see a path forward for what they want to do, and I encourage them, because if they're really capable, they'll find a way. But the other thing is that when you go into college or you go into a career, not that many people end up following the path they chose in the first place. Because if you're going into college and you're 18 years old, 19, and you say, this is what I'm passionate about. And I've seen a lot of PhDs get to the end of their thing and say, you know what? I've had enough of this. This is not really what I want to do. That's a little late. I mean, you want to explore things. And a lot of people make a shift. But so I always tell younger people to plan what they want to do and be ready to change the plan all the time, because they're still learning and still are. And I just find that things come up, opportunities come up. I get kind of crazy when something new comes up and I say, oh, this is a great opportunity to do something different. So I still get excited about that. So I can't say, if I live into my 90s, I can't say what I'll be doing then. I have no idea.
Well, we were talking earlier, and you were saying that you're incredibly, or you find young people very risk averse. Young people are not big on taking risk, and you are the opposite. You like taking risk, or you don't shy away from it. How did you acquire that? Is that something that was innate with you? Did you learn that? And how can we teach young people that risk is okay and change, as a matter of fact, is okay? It's natural and it's frankly inevitable, and it can lead you into very interesting directions.
Yeah, well, change is necessary. I mean, you can't avoid it anyway. There's just no way. Things are going to change around you. So you're going to have to change with it. But I just see that as a great opportunity. And I don't think it's necessarily young people that are risk averse. I think, we all know about the idea of a midlife crisis. Somebody's 40 or 45 and says, I've been doing this my whole life, and why am I still doing this? So you get into a pattern and you just keep doing it. And sometimes you don't think about it. Um, Younger people have the opportunity to explore in a lot of different ways. I mean, everybody does, but so I think maybe a lot of younger people are less risk averse, but well, they do worry. Everybody's different. People worry about making mistakes. And yeah, what if I pick the wrong major in college? Well, you probably will. I mean, you go with the flow, whatever it is. I just feel like things are going to change and your opportunities are going to change, and you need to be open to other ideas, because it turns out that the least risky thing frequently is making a change and going down another path. Because you're going down one path and it looks like a dead end, and you're just going along and going along and going along. it might not lead where you want. These other paths are opportunities to do something else and explore your passion. So why am I not so much that way? I don't know. I'm just a flake. I don't know the answer to that. I just I always I've always been that way. I mean, one thing is that it's not apparent now, but I'm really kind of introverted and shy, not a social person, really. I've overcome that. And I really enjoy what I do because I've learned to deal with it. But I mean, maybe on the autistic spectrum to some extent, and we all know what that's like. But I have always liked when I have been with other people to everybody's going in one direction. And I learned this when I was young. If I follow along with everybody else, how do I know I'm deciding that I want to do that instead of just letting other people decide this is what we're going to do? So I don't know if this is intellectual or just weird. Well, it is weird, but and so I would say I'm going to go this way instead, just because I decided that this is the way I'm going to go. I don't know if it's better or not, but it's my decision. That's a big thing for me. I guess it's called the agency. For me to decide for myself what it is that I'm doing. So, like, look, I was in the 60s. I was a teenager. And before that, in the 50s, there were beatniks, and then there were hippies in the 60s. And I looked at these people, and they were the nonconformists because they didn't fit the usual social mold. And honestly, I looked at them and I said, you're wearing the same clothes, you're using your own language, you're doing the same, everything you do is conforming. It's just conforming to a different set of rules. And my nature was to always look at things and say, yeah, I don't want to conform because it's somebody else's rules, it's a society's rules. I'm just kind of a misfit by nature. I kind of enjoy that. This is not something that you can expect of anybody else. It's just the way I am.
Yeah, and we love you for that. It's important to understand that from a very young age. Maybe not important, but it is a curious thing to understand that from a very young age that you really don't want to not fit in, but conform to groupthink and make decisions
Hmm.
on your own and have the cognizance to notice when you are kind of being influenced by a group and have the strength and the tenacity and the confidence to make your own decision, good, bad, ugly. That's an interesting thing. I don't see that with my generation as well. I feel like they're all this hive mind that goes in one direction and doesn't really know what direction that they're going in. And I don't know whether, again, young people always have this thing of like, we're going to be the generation that saves the world and we're going to be the generation that lives forever. And there's always this young hubris and arrogance. So I don't know whether that's just Gen Z now or whether it was like that in the 60s for you as well.
Yeah, no, I think every generation, when people are younger, they want to reject the older things, which I think is a good thing. But then they fit into their own mold because we're social animals. This is completely natural. If you go back to when we were wandering the savannah in Africa and your tribe is going in one direction, and you said, I'm going to go this way, you're going to get eaten by a lion. I mean, this is not a good thing. There's a reason that we're social animals, and society has great power. So it makes complete sense. It's natural for us. Yeah, being different is not necessarily good survival instinct. But there is a tremendous amount of group thinking that's much, much greater now than ever because of the internet and because of all the things that are there. And people grab onto things, and there's so many more conspiracy theories and all these different things that people just grab onto. And what's disturbing, I find about that is that people are just accepting things and not questioning. And the real trick is to question everything. And so, I would avoid the best selling, product of some kind because, well, it's just advertising or sometimes it's the best one. So, decide for yourself. That is not something that most people seem to be doing now. But just reading about something on the internet and not questioning it. And we've got a lot of problems because of things like that. And people will say afterwards, I didn't realize I was really getting into a cult of thinking and so on. Um, and this has always happened throughout time. It's just it's much worse now because we have the tools for these things to spread. So the main thing I think is to question things and say, well, okay, that feels right, but is it right? And look at the data.
So you were growing up in the 60s, you were a teenager, and this is also when the kind of first space race was going on. Did you learn
Yeah.
anything about that? Like, was there anything that felt right but wasn't right, or was right but didn't feel right?
Well, yeah, looking back, one of the things is that going to the moon has become a big thing again. And younger people say, well, we had Apollo and we went to the moon. We, because it was humanity. It's we, whether you were there then or not. And why haven't we done it again? And there weren't any problems then. We just went out and did it. And so that's not true because people died and things blew up all the time. The U.S. Space program just it was a constant thing of rockets blowing up. Um, and I was very much into that. And I thought it was fantastic when I first heard about Sputnik, the first one into space, and I followed everything. I was really very much into it. One of the things that I realize now is that this was all political, really. It was part of the Cold War. And it felt right to me that we were going to the moon, but did we do it for the right reasons? That's why I kind of question what we're doing now, too, the reasons for going back to the moon and so on. Some of them I don't really buy, um, but it feels right. It's good. It's like, look what we did. And that's a really, really important thing. So, yeah, in retrospect, you can look back and say, I'm not sure these were good reasons to be doing things, but it was a hugely exciting time.
And it's difficult because we're unfortunately going to edge politics, but we can leave that to the side because I really don't want to touch that unless it's necessary for the conversation itself. But
Mm.
do you also feel like now is an exciting time to be a space fan, which is, I guess, is a stupid term, but like to be involved in astronomy, in astrophysics, in, this industry? Is it an exciting time or is it more of a confusing time? Is it a facade? Is it are we being glass half full as a species? Like, are we not thinking things as deeply as we should and just being excited to go to the moon and Mars without being realistic? Like, from somebody like yourself who's very grounded, what does it look like to you?
Yeah, well, that's a great topic. It's a great question because it was super exciting back then when we were going to the moon, and then people got disinterested. I mean, before the Apollo program ended, people weren't even paying attention anymore. Um, there have been very exciting things happening since then. Of course, the uncrewed missions, the robots on Mars and spacecraft going by all the planets and everything. It's unbelievable. It's just I never imagined anything like this in my lifetime. What's happening now is really a revolution. It's an incredible time that is, I think, more exciting than back then because space is really opening up. I mean, the fact that businesses are in this now instead of just nation states, I can't even keep track of all the companies that are landing on the moon. I mean, it's crazy. I remember, it was such a big deal when the U.S. and the Soviet Union landed on the moon with uncrewed. Now I just hear about things and it's like I didn't even know about that one. In space, uh, a lot of people don't. think that NASA's been doing anything, but it's not true because it's not about putting people in space. I mean, we have had people continuously in space for the last 25 years on the International Space Station, other missions, and so on. But space is it's overused now. I mean, it's one of the things that low Earth orbit is just overcrowded and it's leading to some real problems for the future. So that's an effect of having space so open that so many countries and so many companies are going there, and the opportunities now are incredible. So, I mean, for example, I never thought I'd have an opportunity to go to space. And of course, when I got older, there's no way I'd be a NASA astronaut or something like that. Now it's actually possible again. If I had enough money to pay, I could do that. But so this is a really exciting. This is like the real space age starting, where it's open to everybody, and that's a big thing for me. You don't have to be a former military pilot and so on and get on with NASA. Um, so much is happening for both people in space and other things in space. That this is like to me the real space age, not just a few things.
Just as a quick aside, do you know like off the top of your head how much it is to go into space? Like when you say if you had enough money, like is it
I
a couple
think
100,000?
suborbital flights, I think, are on the order of $250,000. And then when you're talking about orbital, it's in the millions, like a trip to the space station, which I don't think they're doing anymore. But yeah, then you're looking at many millions.
And it's highly likely that these prices will be cut in half by come down by orders of magnitude. So it is feasible that in the not too distant future, maybe people from my generation will be able to buy space flights for, the price of a business class ticket or less.
Yes, that's the dream. And I think that it is probably true. They'll come down a lot. Scale makes a big difference. And having companies and others that are innovating in many different ways. I mean, reusable boosters and stuff like that. That's never imagined that. So prices have come down and they will continue to. I don't know if they'll ever get down to the price of a business class ticket, although I can't afford those, so I don't even know what they are exactly. But yeah, if it came down to that, I would do it in an instant. And there are a lot of plans, and you mentioned people going to the moon and onto Mars and so on. I'm not one of those who thinks that we're going to set up civilization on Mars or something like that. I just don't see a reason for it that's worth the billions of dollars it would cost. I don't see the payoff. It's exciting. I know people who would go even on a one-way trip. Um, I I wouldn't. It would take, 5 years to get there and back. So I'd love to see it, but I'm not taking the time. But many other things, and you have to dream. I mean, you have to shoot for something higher than you can accomplish in order to, because if you shoot aim lower, that's as far as you're going to go.
Yeah, so a lot of my generation also thinks that we're going to be on Mars by 2030. I was chastised a lot by saying that I think we'll be on Mars by 2030. I've since pushed my prediction back to 2040, but we'll see. But you said it's not, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're going along the lines of it's not necessary or you don't buy that we need to do that. Why don't you buy that?
Well, it's like, why would we spend the money to do that? Now, if Elon Musk wants to do it and he has the money to do it and he can make it happen, that's great. I don't think NASA will ever send people to Mars really because it's taxpayer money and you got to justify it. So if somebody wants to do it because that's their passion and they have the ability to do it, that's great. Um, but the idea that we're going to be mining and bringing stuff back and so on, these things are questionable, and it's not my area, so I don't know. Um, Vacationing on Mars would be, I don't know if anybody could ever afford to buy a ticket for that. Um, and you're really risking your, I don't think people realize how risky space travel really is. This is not an easy thing. You can make it look easy, but it's not so easy. And you spend most of the money goes into keeping you alive and all of the training. And so, and we can send rovers to Mars that'll be there for years for a tiny fraction. So it depends on what the return is. There's got to be a payoff. And the payoff can be, this is cool. I want to do it because it's a neat experience. That's fine, but you have to be able to afford it. So we'll see.
So then, how, from your perspective, do you think that we'll get to become a multiplanetary species? Is that not feasible at all, or is it more of the Jeff Bezos approach where we just create artificial habitats that orbit the Earth or go throughout space?
Artificial, yeah, habitats orbiting Earth, I can see that happening. Really expensive. And there's got to be some, good reasons for it. But we have the capability to do that. I mean, there are multiple habitats in space right now. And I've known people that have gone there, but they're really rich. Going beyond that to other planets is a very different thing. So I know so many people are going to hate me for saying I don't see that happening. Um, but with the technology we have and what we can foresee, and we don't know what the future holds. So maybe someday it's going to happen, but it's not going to be anytime soon. Maybe in 100 years there'll be technology and things. There are big issues like how do you get all the energy to do this? Well, there are different ways of doing it. We have to develop new technologies for doing that. But keeping people alive in space is an expensive proposition.
Yeah, I do want to double click on that. I don't think people really like when they talk about going to the moon to vacation, moon beaches, and all of that, or even going to Mars as you're talking about. It's like I don't think you factored in the bone density loss, the muscle loss, the radiation, and all of that. Can you speak more to that?
I know a little bit about that. It's not really my area. I just read something about that actually with the return of Butch and Suni, who were there for a much longer than expected time. On the International Space Station, the astronauts, anybody that's there for more than a very short mission, spends 2.5 hours a day working out, exercising. Um, Even gym rats down here on Earth don't. I mean, there are a few people who do that, but they don't. Not that many people do. But it's absolutely necessary. And when you get down, you're still going to have problems. I mean, just read something that Leonard Melvin, he's a NFL football player. He was in bed and he had to get up during the night and he forgot that he was not in weightlessness and he pushed off from the bed and fell on the floor. Uh, and you can't walk. You can't, there's just so many things that happen. Um, can affect your vision long term, all kinds of things. So these longer missions, I think, are going to require artificial gravity, which is not something that you have to look at Star Trek for, where they just make up that there is something. You can do that. They showed it in 2001, way back, where it's circling where it revolves and you can create 1G. That seems like a reasonable thing to do, but those are big ships.
Those are O'Neill cylinders, right? O'Neill spheres.
An O'Neill cylinder would be one of those things, yeah. And those are so cool. I mean, they're long cylinder and the whole thing continues to revolve around. And then there's the old space station from the 50s and so on, which is a big wheel. It's constantly rotating. Um, I mean, 2001 did that really, really well, and it's a very old movie now. Uh, the O'Neill cylinders, you can actually have, trees and lakes and regular community. But that's, it's low Earth orbit. You don't. people don't realize low Earth orbit, you can be like 250, 300 miles above the planet. So this is like an afternoon drive practically. You're not very far up, but the moon is 243,000 miles away. And Mars at its closest is like 30 million. So things scale up really quickly, and the times do too. So, but low Earth orbit, just anything seems possible now, and people are going for it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it makes you really wonder, and I think we've all had the moments where we look up at the stars and just wonder. But you're actually an amateur astronomer in that way.
That's right. Yeah.
What does it mean to be an amateur astronomer?
Oh, it just means really to be an enthusiast, somebody who does astronomy but isn't getting paid for it. I mean, the actual definition, I don't know. The thing is, because a lot of professional astronomers are also amateur astronomers. So a professional astronomer is not somebody who goes and looks through telescopes and all this stuff. You're collecting data. You're frequently not even at the observatory. You just put in your order. It goes through on queue, and you get data back. And you spend your time on a computer. And amateur astronomers spend their time looking through telescopes at things and exploring, and which a lot of professional astronomers have never done, and imaging, taking astrophotographs, and also sharing astronomy with other people out on the street, sidewalk astronomy, public outreach. Just take the telescopes out there and invite people to take a look at the moon up close and things like that. And so I studied astronomy as a major in college, but I actually never completed it and just stayed in astronomy in other ways. And I wanted to comment that looking up the stars and wondering about that and everything, that's how a lot of astronauts started. So it's a very common story.
I think, I mean, it might be hippy dippy, but I think that's how humans or humanity started in general. We looked up and we saw hope and we saw wonder and we started asking questions. I think that really grounded us. I was listening to the Lex Friedman podcast, and he was saying in a very old episode that uh, like our atmosphere actually allows us to see up. So if we had just a denser atmosphere, then we wouldn't be able to look up at the stars. And that's such a terrifying and fascinating perspective because it feels like that's exactly what's happening in our cities now with all the light pollution. We can't look up and see the stars. We're not connected anymore. There's very minimal connection with the contemporary species and the cosmos. I feel like you want to say something on that.
Well, you hit on a lot of good topics there. Um, it's interesting that we always say that humanity has looked up the sky in wonder since the very beginning. And this is my questioning nature. I say, how do we know that? Where's the data for that? I mean, we have records going back a few thousand years. There's no question. But we just assume it because everybody does. It's impossible for it not to be true. And it does provide a lot of things. I was in Ukraine a few months ago, and for astronomy, talking with astronomy students and so on. Very big thing in terms of hope and inspiration, and especially for those of us when we talk about like being in a rut or something. This is a big reason that people love astronomy, and the amateur astronomy, they come from every possible station in life. They can be very rich people or, people who can barely afford to get their telescope, but that's the priority because it's so inspiring. It so connects them with something more. And but the light pollution issue is actually a very big issue because if you think about this, when we say that humanity has looked up at the stars in wonder for so long, that's true up until about 100 years ago when Edison finally hit on the right material to make an incandescent light bulb, and we started lighting everything up. And now we can't see the sky anymore. A large part of humanity, I think, certainly most of the people in Europe, and I think most of the people in the US, don't really see the sky anymore. and we're not connected with it. And people are very interested in things like the Hubble Space Telescope images and the James West Telescope, James Webb. I just get it wrong because it's JWST. Um, and that's great, but they don't realize that they can see stuff. And few people have ever seen the Milky Way, and even those who have never seen a really, really dark sky. It's beyond incredible. And it's just something that we have so lost and makes such a big difference.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. You know, it goes back to the point where it's incredibly controversial and people become really uncomfortable whenever you bring it up. But I don't think that we're living in the most advanced or modern state in human history. It feels like when you look at a lot of things, in particular what we're talking about in terms of light pollution, it doesn't feel like we're advanced at all. Like we have to make the trek out into the countryside in order to look up at the stars for the first time. I've personally never seen a night sky that didn't have light pollution, which is it's an astonishing realization to even have because I don't know what my planet looks like without the filter of without any noise in the sky. But you remember a night sky that was unfiltered.
Well, yeah, and I do go to places that are like that, that still not nearly often enough, but it was really good when I was growing up in a suburb in the 1950s, an area that now you can't see anything. But I do travel, amateur astronomers go off into the mountains or the desert or someplace where it's relatively dark and you can see this, although it's very hard to get away from it 100% in most places. But yeah, because here's the thing. This is my pitch for seeing the night sky. And you hit on it. It is not about out there. It's about here. When you talk about going into space, well, we are in space. I mean, this is spaceship Earth, as Buckminster Fuller called it. And we see that when we look out of the window of spaceship Earth and we see the night sky, we see the rest of the universe. This is not just stars. This is like if you've lived in your home and in your own yard for your whole life, and then one day you climb up on the roof and you see that, wow, I'm part of a huge neighborhood and I can see mountains off there and there are planes going by and there are all these different things. And you never realized where you were. But you can look up in the night sky in a relatively light polluted place and see the bright planets and you can watch them as they're revolving around the sun and the changing positions and changing their brightness and so on. And you can get a feel for it. But when you go out in the dark sky, the Milky Way is not just a thing. That's our galaxy. That is what we're a part of. That's our neighborhood. And it stretches from one side of the horizon to the other because we're inside of it. And all those other stars are other suns, most of which probably have planets of some sort, many of which probably have life on them too. And they're looking up at our sun and saying, yeah, I wonder what's going on over there. And you're just immersed in it. And that's the nature of our existence on Earth. We are immersed in this huge system that we become disconnected from. Yeah. And it's a shame, but it really gives you a lot of perspective.
Yeah, the perspective is so necessary. I liken it to, you know, humans on the shores looking across the oceans and thinking, is there life out there? Are there other people out there? It's like, yeah, obviously we know it now, but back then, you know, 60,000 years ago, they didn't have massive ships, they didn't have planes. They needed to build wooden ships to cross the Atlantic, right? It was a completely different story, but they still did it.
Yes.
They were explorers. It's in our nature as humans to explore, and it does feel like, at least in contemporary culture, that is dying. And so I do want to ask you. You've done a lot of work in developing countries. You were just in Ukraine, talking about astronomy. What is the perspective of astronomy in developing countries? How do they view it? It's a path forward, it's a path of hope.
Astronomy is everywhere. And by the way, I love your analogy of being on the shore and looking out there. And those wooden ships you talk about, those are our telescopes. That's how we explore. But first, you can see the stuff. You can see the islands out there, and then we explore the universe with the telescopes. And that's what's so amazing about it. We go way beyond Mars, just forget about it. We're looking at other galaxies. So astronomy is the same every place. That's one of the amazing things about it. People can talk about there's geology everywhere, but it's different geology. There's food, there are different cultural things that are common to every place, but it's different every place. Astronomy is the same. And when I would go to, for example, I've been to Iran many times, and when I would stay with friends in Tehran, it's at the same latitude as my home in Southern California that you can see behind me here. And the sky's exactly the same. And it's one of the things you realize when you travel to, if you're looking up, that we're all looking at exactly the same thing. Now, if you go to the south, you see different stars, but but you see many of the same things, and everybody's fascinated by it. There just isn't any difference. And there are amateur astronomers I've met in places where they couldn't get a telescope, but they're still sharing what they've learned about astronomy with other people. So they know it, but it's more intellectual. And plus, they can go out, they can at least see the night sky out in the desert someplace or something. So that's one of the things that I've used over the years to connect people. Another organization that I created that would connect people around the world based on astronomy. And that developed at a time when there was a lot of saber rattling, sort of like now, between the US and Iran. And I connected people between the countries through their common passion in astronomy. And it's a big thing. And the so yeah, it's just amazingly a common experience.
You used a very powerful phrase earlier in the chat, just in a different context. You said, we went to the moon, and you differentiated it between the generations. My generation doesn't feel like they went to the moon, and you're saying, no, we did as humans.
Yeah.
And it feels like we can also use this same framework to talk about we went to the moon as we, humanity, in a global sense. It's not just the US, but it's all of us. We all had that same drive. And sure, politics were a big drive, and that aside, it's still us as a species going to our satellite and then embarking on whatever quest we can imagine.
Hmm.
And so, how
Hmm.
should we use, just from your perspective, how can we use astronomy to shape humanity's future just in the way of going beyond politics? Is there a way to use astronomy to enact peace, to enact change, to give that to people, to go beyond the geopolitics and the hatred, and to manifest love and understanding? These are hippie
Yeah.
concepts, I know, but like if we don't talk about them, then we're just doomed to repeat the past.
Yeah, and this is not just a dream because this has happened many times and I've seen it and I've done a lot of work in that with traveling. Um, Initially I was traveling to other countries like Iran in 99 for a total solar eclipse, but other people all came into that spot chasing the same thing and it had nothing to do with where they are from or anything else. And you know what it's like when you meet somebody you seem to have nothing in common with. And then you say, then you find out that they're interested in something that you are, some niche. And all of a sudden, you get it. You're connected. That's the way it works with astronomy. But the difference is that it's all of us. Many people haven't looked up and they haven't gotten that. But for all those people that have, and there are amateur astronomers in every country, we're looking up there together. And I can be looking at the moon from California, somebody else is looking from India. It might be just, I have to think about which way the Earth turns. But for one of us, it's setting, for the other, it's rising. It's the same planet. We're looking at the same thing. That's when we realize we're all on the same planet. And we don't get that from anything else. It's the one thing that's really universal. And there are a lot of things I've done, made connections people in different countries. One, there was a program that was started by some students in Iran that I helped with as part of my organization. It was called Star Peace, and I connected people in Iran and Iraq because I've been to both places, and they fought a big war and they hate each other, and then they met through astronomy and realized that they're just the same. They even speak very similar languages and have similar cultures. In this case, it was in Kurdistan. I need to specify that Iraqi Kurdistan, a Persian culture. And Star Peace had connections between, for example, amateur astronomers in India and Pakistan. These are very much countries that don't get along at the governmental levels. But the people there, they were on opposite sides of the border with their telescopes looking at stuff and talking to each other on their cell phones. And like they're 100 meters apart, and there's this line there with military and everything. What's the difference? And you look up, they're looking at the same thing. So it is a very powerful way of doing things. And I work with that as much as I can.
It's a powerful way of doing things across borders, and it's also a powerful way to, reframe yourself across your mental border. At times, especially for young people, especially for being a young person, all the problems that you face feel like the biggest problems in the world. And when you look up, especially when you look at things like the Hubble Ultra Deep Field image, which is just for anybody that doesn't know, just Google the Hubble Ultra Deep Field image, and what you see is basically 13.8 billion years. You're seeing back in time. You're seeing billions to trillions of galaxies. It's absurd. But you start realizing how small you are. And that's not an intimidating thing. It's actually a very powerful thing. It's actually a very calming thing. And this is, I think, closes the loop nicely of we need to restore our relationship with the cosmos, because I think that's exactly what makes us us. I think if we had a relationship with the cosmos in cities or just in general in the 21st century, a lot of the problems that we have now would cease to exist. But maybe again, that is youthful arrogance. Um, do you have anything to say? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, if we all connected through astronomy, everybody looked up and we talked to each other, all the problems would go away. It's not going to happen that way. I mean, astronomy can change the world, and it does in small ways, but it's not going to fix all the problems because we got other people that aren't really interested in that, and they're the ones who want power. And so, I go back to the 60s and, power to the people and all of that. But I agree with you. It is very powerful in that way.
Those annoying people in society, they just want the money and the fame and the power, and they can't see, they talk about being wealthy and everything, but the real riches and power is within yourself. But again, that sounds a little hippy dippy. I do have one kind of tangential question for you. So David Kipping is an astrophysicist who I'm very fond of. He runs the Cool Worlds Laboratory, Cool Worlds YouTube channel, and he was talking about exoplanets and how his search for exoplanets was very invigorating, but also he didn't want to name his daughter after an exoplanet, because if he did, he wouldn't be able to give up on that quest. He wouldn't be able to say, oh, that exoplanet never existed. And that's such an interesting thing to talk about, because in our search, there is a lot of hubris, especially in astronomy, for finding things out. I don't know if it's the right question to ask, but how can we balance the hubris of exploring and being the first with also, the love and necessity of exploring in general?
Well, you mentioned before that we are natural explorers, and that's absolutely true. And I think science in general is that you scientists do what they're doing because they're exploring. They want to learn, just like the natural scientists, the kids who are crawling around and opening kitchen cabinets and pulling everything out. They're checking everything out and exploring their space. And that really is the drive for it. There's always hubris in every field, and that's going to happen in science as well. And there are explorers who were going to be want to be interested more in fame than the exploration itself. Um, but that's something about humanity that some care for things about themselves more than others. And there are many scientists who start off maybe for the right reasons, but they get really wrapped up in making it about them rather than their quest. Um, so it's just going to happen. I don't think there's any way to keep that out of anything. There are a lot of human traits that are not really helpful. It's the way it goes.
Well, you didn't succumb to that. I mean, you founded Astronomy for Equity, which I'd love for you to talk about more. But that's a social entrepreneurial venture that is good for everybody.
Yeah, well, that's my drive. And I've been a professional scientist as well, a research scientist, but not in astronomy. I've always, I don't know why, even in my earlier super shy days, I just saw things kind of clearly. Maybe it's the autistic side or something, and sort of looked at the overall, and people would say, well, you seem to understand what's going on here. You lead things. But I never wanted to be out in front. I like making things happen, but I don't like having it about me. And I've gone through progression with that. And now that I have some reputation and so on, I'm always being pushed to build my brand. I don't want to be a brand, really, but I know that it's valuable. So I do that. And it's when people say things about me, about, oh, it's, I'm, doing good things and so on. I mean, I have trouble even describing this. I get very uncomfortable about it being about me, but that's not to say I don't like to hear that I've done good things. That's feedback. I love it. Um, Astronomy for Equity is just my latest thing that I've either founded or led. And this is based on the things that I've learned about how astronomy can be used for good. There are so many ways around the world in which astronomy is used to improve people's lives, especially those who are marginalized, isolated. And I don't even use the term underserved communities anymore because that only goes so far. There are a lot of communities that are underserved, but they're served in some way. But the vast majority of the world, and you talked about developing countries, they're not underserved. They're just not served. They'll never hear about these and you have no opportunities. And I know people around the world who are working in rural areas in Ethiopia or Pakistan or other countries like that where they don't even have electricity regularly. The schools don't have a floor in the classroom, but or they might not have furniture. They sit on the floor. Places like this, why would astronomy be important for places like this? Well, because they don't have science facilities. So how are you going to teach science? The teachers don't even have science education. Astronomy is accessible to everyone. Ironically, those places like this, when they go outside at night, they see the sky the way it's supposed to be. So they have a better astronomy lab than we do in our big cities. And it's there all the time. It's accessible to everybody. Everybody's interested because we're explorers and like, what is going on up there? You explain to people what they're seeing, and everybody's fascinated by it. So it's astronomy is used to introduce science in developing countries and other marginalized places. We're launching a thing now, a community to share resources for doing astronomy with blind people. This is something that nobody really understands because we think of astronomy as being visual. We just make it visual. We don't see X-rays, and the JWEST is the telescope is taking images in infrared. We can't see that. They're making pictures out of the data, which is what our brains do too, but we just get a little bit of data. So there are ways to introduce it to blind people as well. Um, Examples of people in Nigeria, there's a group that I've supported a lot and just interviewed the person who started it on our podcast, who use astronomy to introduce girls to science because it's a fraternal society. They don't know that they can go into science if they want to. But this is a woman who started this, and she's a manager at their space agency. They built a STEM lab, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, in a shipping container in a refugee camp for the kids there, using astronomy because that's what they have. So there are so many ways in which it is used to inspire people to go into science. And this is not just for the individuals. Developing countries, by definition, need more scientists and engineers and everybody else. So the more we inspire people to go into that, the more people there are to build their countries, to take care of their own infrastructure, to get the things, to build the things that they need, grow the food that they need, and not have to depend on others.
What does Carl Sagan's pale blue dot perspective mean to you?
Wow. I just shivered thinking about it. Because I've listened to him reciting from his book with a video and the music so many times. I can hear it in my head. I use it in presentations. It's about the whole idea of looking outside of our own individual bubble at the entire planet and the nature, what like what we were talking about before, the nature of our planet. And this is one of the things that we get. This is one of the many ideas I have that'll turn into a project someday if I'm lucky. But we've had pictures of Earth taken from spacecraft all around the solar system, and we can see it, and we can see where we are in relation to all the other planets. So it's another way of looking at our situation on Earth by getting away from it and looking back. And this is one of the things the astronauts and some that I know that I've talked to have when they go into space, and we talk about how they look down at the Earth and see it as a planet. It's not like that. They go into space and they see Earth among the stars. I mean, the atmosphere is just teeny, teeny, tiny, and they see the stars all around it, setting and rising. And it's a planet among the stars. And it's a completely different thing. It gives you perspective on on where we are, the nature of our existence, and how everybody is down there together, and you can't tell who's who, and you just see places. But that's something very few of us get an opportunity to do. But astronomy gives us a chance to at least look back the other way.
It's a beautiful chance, and it's a chance that can be given to everybody. You know, it doesn't require much. They don't need many credentials in school, no student debt or anything. It just requires curiosity and maybe a telescope. Um, if
Yeah.
you had a magic wand and you could solve one problem in the world, what would it be and why?
Ooh, we have so many problems. I have trouble making decisions about easy things like what clothes to wear. Uh, I, wow. I'm not quite sure what to say about that one. Um, yeah, my mind is reading at all the problems that we have. You know, there's one astronaut that I know. He's been in space 5 times, and he's seen our situation. He's done a lot of work in different countries too since he left NASA. And his motto is the key is we. And I really like that. The problem is we don't talk to each other, and I don't know. I mean, this you ask if I could had a magic wand. So this is magic talk here. If we could get people to talk to each other more, because I've done some of that through astronomy, and it actually hugely increases understanding, and it is the solution, the answer for the groupthink. Instead of these people are bad, and that feels right to you because you keep hearing it, so then it feels right. you meet the people and go, "Oh, wait a minute, this is not, like when I first went to Iran, I came back and I started talking about astronomy in Iran, and it was and wrote magazine articles. It was 95% about the country and the people there because they're just like us and they love America and many different things that people had wrong. And even people I knew who thought they were our enemies would look at this and I'd say, they can't get telescopes. These kids are in this. Well, they'd say, well, how can we get them telescopes? They went from saying, well, we should attack them or we should overthrow their governments to just like, these are people. How can we help them? So I guess that's the main thing is to get people to meet and understand each other. That would solve everything. And we wouldn't have powerful people who can lie to us about stuff because we're not going to get into politics, but that's the problem, really, that people with the power are able to. I sound like I'm coming straight out of the 60s now. And I was not a hippie,
No, but you know
but
what it is? It's very disheartening because you're talking about problems that existed in the 60s that still exist today. And
mm,
so whether a time traveler from the 60s is watching this or just a Gen Z is watching this, it's the same problem that permeates throughout time. And there's no real good solution to it unless there is a good solution. But it unless we find a good solution, but there's no progress being made in figuring that out. No social technological progress or anything like that, as far as we know. And that's why we're talking about astronomy in this way, because astronomy can be used as a tool to aid in this kind of reconfiguration. At least we hope.
yeah. Yeah, and you said throughout time, which goes way back farther than the 60s, always has been, and it's not going to be any different in the future. But this is another reason that I like to travel to some places, whether it's, there's a war going on like Ukraine, or to enemy countries like Iran and Iraq. I was in Baghdad just weeks before the US invasion, and I got to see what the real situation was. And I'm just curious, and I want to know for myself. And I wish everybody had the same curiosity and just said, I'm going to check this out for myself and see what it's really like and learn about it. And I love doing that in whatever way it is. Anything I'm into, I'm interested in everything. So, um, one of the things that I've been involved in a discussion with other people in the space community is what is our future going to be like when we're out among the stars? Is it going to be Star Trek where we're all getting along with each other? Or will it be the expanse where it's just like Earth, but it's in space? And I think it's going to be like the expanse because I don't see any way we're going to get out of that. But if we had enough social movement of people cultural exchanges are great. People learn things. I've taken people to Iran and came away with a completely different understanding. So the internet is a tool that can be used for these things. It's just like everything else, the technology can be used for good or bad.
As a final question, what gives you hope in the world?
Well, there is a lot more interest now in questioning things, um, not just tearing down old things, but really with the rise of conspiracy theories, the ease with which they spread, because it's nothing new. With the future of AI being a tool to, how can I say this, that the powerful can use to their advantage for making things worse as far as that goes. These tools can also be used for good things. I'm hopeful now that we have younger people who've grown up with the internet and with all these other tools that are very natural for them. Uh, Unlike us old people, though I still learn all the new things, so I'm not an old boomer because I build my own computers and everything else. but it's not natural uh, for us, the new technologies. But the people that grow up with it, I guess it always has to come back to the young people. That in some place they will listen to the older people who say, look, this has been going on a long time, but you have the ability to do this now. Learn from the mistakes of the past and use the tools of the future to make positive change. And it's like Gandhi said, um, be the change you want to see in the world. We need more people to take that to heart.
That's beautiful. Mike, thank you so much for this episode. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Where can we find you online?
Well, Astronomy for Equity, Astro number four, equity.org. You can see about our programs. The website's out of date. It's going to get rebuilt in a couple of weeks, blah, blah, blah. The usual, keeping up with the tech stuff. But there's stuff there and contact and everything else. Anybody wants to reach out. I'm on the social media stuff too, which I try to leave to younger people because that's a tool I don't really like. I don't want to do it. I let the younger people deal with that. So that's the main thing. But I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on. I can be found there.
Okay. Well, if you do make a TikTok, make sure to email it to me. We'll put all your links in the description. But
Yeah.
Mike, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. It's been really a delight talking to you.